portfolio podcastek.
Hey, I'm Portfolio Podcast Editor Levente Hörnputot, and you're listening to a special edition of Portfolio Checklist. The rules of the game in artificial intelligence are changing fast. Vibe coding and agentic coding are reshaping the entire AI landscape at unprecedented speed, and the consequences are only beginning to unfold. One thing already seems clear, though: the debate about whether AI is really improving or just hitting a wall may finally be over. So the real question now is, how should business leaders respond? What should companies look out for when adopting AI? And how do you start transforming an organization into a truly AI-first company? To explore all that and more, I'm thrilled to welcome Kathleen Walsh, Director at the Project Management Institute, host of the AI Today podcast, and a globally recognized top 10 AI thought leader. And Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great that you're here. You actually flew in from the US just for us to attend our AI in Business conference, which was yesterday. How did you like the event? What was your main takeaway?
I thought the event was great. I always love to get to meet people, right, from other countries and different regions and hear how they're thinking about AI, adopting it. What are some of their fears, concerns, challenges, wins? And then I usually spot general themes, right? Everybody's really excited. Most people now have at least been using AI in some capacity in their personal or professional lives. And they're starting to hit some roadblock, right? How do you fully embrace this at your organization? How do you move past the basics? Some people are doing it, but I always say AI is a journey, and I find that most people are newer on their journey, right? There's sometimes some organizational resistance that needs to be overcome for a number of different reasons, right? Large organizations just move a little slower.
Yeah, this is not the first time we're talking. We had you on a podcast like 6 years ago, actually, which is crazy. And I just checked what we were talking about at the time. And I really wonder, looking back at the year of 2020, in your judgment, how has AI evolved since that time? And has it evolved the way you imagined it would?
So 2020 feels like a lifetime ago for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And 6 years in AI is like 60 years, right?
Yeah.
Because things move so fast. Looking back, it has not gone the way that I've expected in a positive way. So that was before, right? OpenAI came out with ChatGPT, really revolutionized and kind of re-energized the market is what I'll say. I think that it re-energized the market. And when I look at AI, right, the term was officially coined in 1956. There's been a very long history with this. But we've been in two previous AI winters, which is a period of decline in investment, decline in popularity, people move towards other technologies. And there was a real concern. I mean, there's always a concern that this can happen again, but there was a real concern that this was going to happen. And that's why I said I think that, OpenAI and LLMs, right, ChatGPT really reinvigorated the industry, that now everybody is talking about AI, everybody is using AI, and they're really thinking about how it can help them transform the way that they work in ways that it wasn't possible before.
Yeah, AI is all over the place. And that's why CEOs are scratching their heads, right? Because they just feel overwhelmed. And with reason. I recently came across the global CEO survey of PwC, and they found that 77% of CEOs don't see any benefit of using AI just yet. So it's a huge problem. And as you pointed out in your presentation at the conference, 80+% of AI projects actually fail. So it's a big issue, but how to get started and what to address here? What goes wrong?
So when I think about, right, 80+% of AI projects fail, that's a huge number. And so not every project is going to succeed, right? But it's higher than most traditional IT projects. So I've identified a number of different reasons why they fail, right? Looking at them, because it's important to learn so that you can move forward. One of the biggest reasons is that people treat AI projects like traditional software development projects when they're really data projects. And so I go, when you think about traditional software development projects, what's the most important thing? The code, right? You would never give your code away. That's so valuable. But when it comes to AI projects, it's your data. That's the most valuable, which means you need to run it with data-centric methodologies. I also find the return on investment, right? A lot of people want to just move forward with AI. They feel this fear of missing out, this FOMO. They think their competition is doing it. And they read a lot of articles, right? And they read how some organizations are doing it and they go, we need to do this. And so before they actually think about, well, what problem are we trying to solve? Let's make sure that AI is the right solution. They just move forward with an AI solution. And you're like, what does this even mean? Far too often, organizations just throw AI tools at folks and then expect them to learn how to use them, right? So whether you're a Google shop or you're a Microsoft shop, whatever shop it is, right? Claude, some people are using, they'll just give you the tool and go, now go learn it. And it's up to you to figure out how to make this efficient. And it's up to you to figure out how to put this in your workflow. And what I found is that a small portion of people are going to get super excited. They'll take the time to do the research. Maybe they'll do it on nights and weekends. They'll really incorporate this. But the vast majority of folks at your organization are going to use it here and there. I call them taskers, right? They'll use it for certain tasks. Maybe they'll help it create a PowerPoint presentation, and they'll use it for some images, and they'll use it to help rewrite some of the text in the images, but they're not using it as a full workflow, right? They don't use it to brainstorm and then have it create the actual slides and then take an edit pass. They're still doing these manually. And then you have another part of your organization that's just going to flat out resist this, and they're never going to use the tool. And so the gap starts widening with the people that are really forward-leaning, taking the initiative, and the folks that are not doing that. And it does not create cohesion at your organization. It starts to create more of a divide. And so that is like not the way that I recommend doing that at all. Another big common reason that AI projects fail obviously is around data, right? Data quality, data quantity. And a lot of times folks don't have access to some of the data that they need, or it's in a poor, state of quality. These are real issues when it comes to AI. And then the last reason is this idea of overpromising and underdelivering. So people get so excited about what it can do and they go, we want this and this and this. And then it doesn't happen, right? I see this even sometimes at my organization, and people go, this is great, but this doesn't, thank you for giving me this tool. But before I do research into it, it doesn't fix this one thing that I have. So I need this tool too. And I'm like, okay, no, you don't, right? But then other people get so excited and they go, well, it can do this and this and this, right? Because they see it in Hollywood and science fiction and novels. And then it doesn't actually perform as expected, right? So we overpromise on what it can do and then underdeliver, and then people get disappointed and they stop using the tool.
Right. The pressure is still huge, though, right, on business leaders. And the other day, Sadi and Nutella just said at the World Economic Forum that actually it's all about leadership will. But do you think it's that simple?
Well, it starts from the top, I find, right? A lot of people resist AI, right? They have fears and concerns, right? They don't resist AI, they resist uncertainty. And when an organization tells you to use AI, and they don't teach you how to use it, and then you hear in the news, and maybe it's actually happening at your organization, that people are being let go and they're blaming it on AI, people start getting really concerned. So I think it does start at the top, and leaders really need to say, we want to embrace AI. We're not looking to replace you. We're looking to help you. And I call this augmented intelligence, where you're not replacing the human, but helping the human do their job better. When you approach it that way, people have less resistance, right? They're more embracing of the technology. You also need to make sure that you have a AI community of practice, and also an onboarding and upskilling program, so that you give people the tool and then you continually teach them how to use it over time. I find that that's the most successful. But people, also can get really burned out from the technology sometimes as well, where it's supposed to alleviate what you're doing. But now, especially with agents, and if you have agentic workflows and you need to manage, a little army of agents, it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, and you need to rework stuff and supervise the agents, so to say. It's a lot of work, and it's got to be mind-boggling in a way too. What I'm really curious about, though, is that whether all kinds of companies do need AI, or are there certain companies that can get away with this whole thing?
And get away with no AI
Yes.
at all?
Or just minimize the use of it?
That's a difficult question because all companies is so broad, but I will say that AI is impacting and changing every single industry. So even industries that you think maybe wouldn't need AI, like agriculture, for example, there's a lot of different ways that you can use AI to become much more efficient. So if you think about, you can have robots that automatically will pick produce for you. And so this helps if you have labor shortages, right? So that you don't have crops that go to waste in your field. Also with pesticide control, so you can use computer vision to help spot and identify what are weeds versus what are healthy crops, so that you don't have to just do that, spray and pray. You can actually do targeted pesticide control. So every industry has something to gain from AI, and I don't think that anybody can avoid it anymore.
Right. So actually, what you would say is like everybody should start exploring the potential AI has to offer, no matter where they work and what industry they are. Right.
Exactly. And this doesn't need to just be large language models, right? The two examples that I gave are not. One's, an autonomous robot, and the other one is computer vision, right? Making sure that you're only spraying those weeds.
Right. I really want to talk about vibe coding and agentic coding because, these are things that are really, really disrupting everything. And, with cloud coding around, you just can't believe what's happening, right? AI agents even have their own social network, Moldbug, where they hang out and they even demand their own bill of rights. I mean, that's just crazy. But, jokes aside, these new solutions totally have the potential to take your organization to a whole new level. And what I'm really wondering, whether against this backdrop, what strategy should companies embrace? How does vibe coding or agentic coding or both influence AI readiness or AI literacy within the company?
So I always say embrace curiosity, right? Allow your employees to play around, maybe in a sandbox environment, a controlled environment, so that it's not impacting the day-to-day operations that you have at your organization, but embrace this. And smaller organizations are going to be a lot more nimble and a lot easier to embrace some of this than larger organizations, just because of the way that they're set up. Vibe coding is changing the game. What I have noticed is that it's changing the game for smaller organizations, for individuals that want to go out and start a company. Maybe they weren't a coder before. Now with vibe coding, they're able to create a website. They're able to create, things that they absolutely were never able to create before. I have friends that are doing this. It's really interesting to see. It gets you a lot of the way there, but not 100% of the way there. And, like we said, 6 years ago feels like an eternity. So who knows what's going to happen 6 years from now, maybe even 6 months from now. But I find that it gets you a majority of the way there. It can give you a nice prototype, but to actually go into production, not a lot of the tools are ready for that. And so that's where things can get scary, because people will put them out. And they'll be, they think they're production ready, and people start using them, and it's going to have security issues that we just can't expect yet, right? It's not going to go as expected. Sometimes these systems are going to go down. They're going to break. And if you don't know how to code or fix these, then you're vibe coding an entire new solution. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. But it is allowing folks to do things that they were never able to do before.
And that also means that productivity should go up, but the human in the loop factor still remains crucial.
Yes. And productivity going up, maybe, right?
So you're not 100% sure.
Well, because it switches, right?
Okay.
So now, yes, you maybe don't need somebody to build out a website for you, but now you need to manage the website in ways that you didn't have to do before. So productivity can go up, but then also maybe you're adding more to your plate now. Right. And so maybe, like I had said earlier, you're managing these army of agents. And so what does that do? It's kind of a different skill set now. It's a different cognitive load that you have to handle. When does it turn off? Right. I say AI isn't set it and forget it. So what happens if something goes wrong in the middle of the night? Now are you expected to have to fix this, where before you had, more normal 9 to 5 working hours? So it's changing the game. I don't know how it will play out, but I am an AI optimist. So I am excited to see, how people are playing around and doing different things. But you do have to make sure that you also understand some of the security risks, keeping humans in the loop, right? Don't just put something out there and hope for the best.
And that also means that the whole return on investment thing also will be reshaped and it needs to be recalculated. You got to do the math over and over again, right?
Yeah. And also, you have to make sure always, whenever you're using AI and really doing anything, what problem are you trying to solve? Make sure that it's a big problem worth solving, not just a little project, because if you want to go out and explore, play around with these tools, you absolutely can. But if you're not solving a real problem and you're not talking to your stakeholders and you're not engaging with the potential end users, you can build a solution that people don't use. And that's also where vibe coding makes that easy. And so you're building solutions that people are never going to use. So there's just a lot of expended effort. You still need to have those kind of fundamentals in place, those business fundamentals, AI fundamentals in place whenever you're doing something.
Do you think it's a possibility that with all these new tools emerging, companies actually are going to need like entire AI architect teams whose job would be, to supervise all these new workflows and tasks and everything?
Yes. So a lot of organizations, right, when we think about any transformative technology, there's been disruption to the workforce, but it doesn't mean we have mass unemployment. So if we think about, different waves of technology, right? I mean, even if you think about the internet, well, that maybe disrupted some industries, but then it created entire new ones. Now we have social media marketers and we have website designers. These didn't exist pre-internet. You think about mobile. Now we have mobile app developers, right? And we have people that are actually building the mobile hardware where we didn't have that before. So any new technological wave will cause disruption. So a lot of organizations now are saying, oh, I can become so much more efficient with AI. I don't need as many employees. And while that may be true right now, just what you said, as we start bringing more complexity into our workflows, we are going to need people to manage that. And that's going to be new skill sets that are emerging, but it doesn't mean that we don't need people.
Right, which brings us to the question whether young employees are needed at all, because you look at the numbers and stats don't lie. It seems that the number of entry-level jobs is going down, which is unfortunate, and fresh graduates are kind of panicking. What's going on? Their jobs are being eliminated as we speak, because AI is ultimately going to be able to perform most of the tasks they've been charged with. What would you suggest CEOs should do? Should they keep hiring young talent, or should they just go rational, so to say, quote unquote, rational, and try to cut costs on that end?
Depends on what your long-term play is. So if your short-term play is to cut costs, then you're not going to hire, young employees. But young employees turn into old employees. So if you don't hire them ever, then you don't have an experienced workforce at some point. So you have to look at that long-term play and say, what do you really want here, right? And is this the best decision for your organization, or is this a short-term gain?
Yeah, well, I really hope it's gonna, play out the way it should, and that the young will benefit, because I'm also 100% sure that young talent is crucial, and they have a whole different perspective of life, and that every organization can benefit from.
I totally agree. Also, having young children, I'd like to make sure that they have a future.
Yeah, you're right. Now, we need to touch upon the intelligence explosion, as experts love to refer to it, because we discussed it at the conference as well, that it is happening. AI is now helping build itself. AI agents can actually now code and optimize themselves. So where does this whole thing lead us? Where are we going to end up, and how fast?
I know. I mean, again, it's so hard to predict with AI, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen 3 months from now. It's exciting to see this. I always say, though, make sure you keep a human in the loop and understand really what's going on, because it's hard to pull things back. So once we've let it out, right, it is really hard to pull things back. And it's exciting to see. It's exciting to see this progress. But again, I want to see it play out, right? That we do have this intelligence explosion. And now we're moving faster than ever before. And so sometimes technology is moving faster than people can even keep up with it. So I've started to see that at organizations. It doesn't mean that we should halt any of this, but just I tell people really make sure that you understand what's going on, because even with vibe coding, for example, if you don't know how to code, you can't fix this, right? And so then the idea is that you're not fixing the code and that you're just regenerating an entire new code base, which is basically regenerating an entire new product. That maybe works in some situations, but other times you might have liked version 5 and now you're on version 7 or version 20, and you can't get back to that older version. So you have to make sure that you understand that as you're moving forward.
So let's just zoom out a little bit, because we all know that AI developments are a lot faster in the US, especially in the Valley. You guys are ahead of the rest of the world, and especially Europe, at least 1.5 years or something. So where do you see the position of Europe in this global AI arms race? As we all know, we have the AI Act, which is pretty much like an ethics first legislation. So Europe is really good at regulating. Everybody knows that. We're still lagging behind when it comes to investments and innovation. But, I really want to hear from you from across the pond. What's the perception you've got of our continent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say that China is also very advanced as well, right? As are some other countries in Asia.
Of course.
And so Europe has a unique perspective, right? They're very cautionary. And so they'll put laws and regulations in place ahead of any technology, so that they can kind of put those guardrails in place, where America is more of a wait and see approach, which honestly a lot of the rest of the world is as well. So you can look at it from two lenses, right? So you say, okay, well, we're helping give people guardrails so that they know how to build this, right? Ethically, responsibly, with these guardrails in place. Or you can say, let's see how the technology plays out, and then we'll put laws and regulations in place to make sure that we're controlling this. I mean, obviously, being in the United States, right, we have a different attitude and a different kind of appetite, maybe, for some of this. And so it's interesting, because when the EU AI Act came out, some people were saying, right, there was proponents of it, and then there was also some naysayers. And so, time can only tell. And there haven't been as many countries that are really moving forward, like at the same speed as probably the US and China. But there are countries that are doing some of this, right? Yesterday we had talked a little bit about sovereign AI and what does that look like, right? And there are countries in Europe that are really moving forward with AI. France, Germany, right? Some of these large countries. And people are still talking about it. I like the wait and see approach, because when you put guardrails in place, it just tells people how to skirt around them, where when you actually kind of let the technology flow, you see how people are using it, how it's adopting, how it's moving and changing so fast, because AI is moving and changing so fast. And then you put guardrails in place to see around how it's actually being adopted and used.
Well, Hungary is a small country, and Europe is full of small countries, right? And I'm really wondering, with all this craze out there, do small countries and companies that operate in small countries, or relatively small countries, let's put it that way, do they stand a chance at all in this whole global AI race to prevail? And if so, is there an angle they should focus on? What's the silver bullet here, if there's any?
So AI is broad, right? I mean, small companies probably are not going to win in an LLM game, right? It's just going to cost a lot of money to train these systems, a lot of compute power, but they can win in niches. And we're still seeing that, right? So I say, again, figure out what problem you're trying to solve, pick a niche, and then go win at it. And that gives everybody the chance to play in this AI space.
Awesome. Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing it all with us. We appreciate it tremendously.
Thanks so much for having me.
I talked to Kathleen Walsh, director at the Project Management Institute, host of the AI Today podcast, and a globally recognized top 10 AI thought leader, about the latest trends of artificial intelligence. And that's all for today. This episode was engineered by Balint Banidi. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.